Hello there. This is going to be the final video for the course as we cover the last topic, part 2 of vectors. In this exercise, we need to write a for loop that uses an iterator to pass through each element of a vector and print them. Not much that needs to be done here, but we're going to use some new tricks that we haven't explored before, namely the form of the iterator. So, before we begin, we should always include the vector library that we need. We'll make a vector of integers, myvec, which will have some numbers in it, just for fun. Now we want to use a for loop, but instead of using a for loop that's just going to iterate through, 5 times, we're going to try to use an iterator to do it for us. So we'll use this code here to make ourselves an iterator for an integer vector. And in order to point it to the right spot, we need to use the .begin or .end methods to grab those iterators. So before I go into my for loop, I need to make my iterator equal to myvec.begin, because I'm grabbing the beginning of the vector. And now for and actually I can write this a different way, which is to grab this, make the iterator here, initialize the iterator over here, and then I say while iter1 is not equal to myvec.end, meaning that it has reached the end, iter1 plus plus. And now I have a pointer that's going to point through my vector, and so I can say, I want to output them all, right? So we're going to output what's at iter1 and see what we get. And look at that, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll see if this works in Python Tutor. I'm not quite sure. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not a big deal. But it's possible that I might be able to see it function. Let's find out. Oh yeah, okay. So here's my vector. My iterator is pointing to the 6 at first. That's the beginning of the vector. The end of the vector, just as a reminder, is the space after the last element. So once we've hit the end, we are done. And now as I print the 6 and I increment the iterator with iter1 plus plus, you can see the arrow just moves on to the next one, and on to the next one, and next one, and next one, and hooray, we've used an iterator. So that's our first exercise. We can move on to the next one. So exercise 2. Write a function that takes 2 vectors of the same type as parameters, modify the second vector to add all of the first vector's elements in order, starting at the front of the vector. So if I have 2 vectors, 1, 2, and 7, 9, then it should leave the 1, 2 vector as it is, but the 7, 9 vector should become 1, 2, 7, 9. And the way we're going to need to do this is using, of course, well, there's a couple different ways to do it, but the cleanest way to do it is using insertion, which is on the previous slide. So insert has 2 parameters. One is what you need to insert, and one of them is an iterator that points to the place that you want to insert. So this is why we need to know how iterators work if we want to use some of these functions like insert. So if we want to do this, let's get things started. First of all, we need to have a function. It's not going to return anything, so it's going to be a void. And what's it do? It's going to modify the second vector. So we'll call this modify second. It's going to take 2 vectors, vector 1, call it vec1, and vector int vec2. Now, I suppose I need to modify vector 2, so I'll pass that one as a reference, but vector 1 I actually don't really need to pass as a reference. I suppose it doesn't matter, I can do it. I can leave it there anyway, but notably I want to modify vector 2, so that one I definitely need to make sure that I'm passing by reference, so when I change it, it's actually changed. Okay, so in order to modify vector 2, I need to add all of the first vector's elements in order to the front of the other vector. So that means I need to iterate through my first vector, and as I go through there, I want to insert everything into the second one. Now, notably, I want to make sure I'm inserting them all in order. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to either be inserting them from back to the front. So if I want to insert everything always at the front of the vector, then I need to start by inserting the 2, then the 1. Or what I can do is I can just insert everything and push one step at a time the place that I'm inserting. But that can get kind of messy, so I think I'm going to do it the other way, which is I'm going to start at the end of my first vector and insert that to the beginning of the second vector and do that until I've inserted everything from the first. So first off, I need to go through all of this vector from the end to the beginning. So for we're going to need a vector int iterator iter1 equals vec1 dot end minus 1. So this gives me the last one. We're going to keep going until iter1 is equal to myvec dot begin minus 1, because that means I've reached the I've gone past the beginning, and I'm going to do iter1 minus minus because I'm going backwards. Now in here I want to take the thing I'm pointing at right now and insert that into vector2. So I just need to do vector2 dot insert, and I need to have where I'm going to insert it, and it's going to insert it to, I believe, to the, just before the element specified by the pointer. So if I actually do vector2.begin, that's always the place I want to insert it into. And the value I'm going to be inserting is what's at the iterator from the first vector. This is vec2.begin. Now, if this works correctly, then I should have completely modified my second vector as I need to. So to see if this works, we're going to make another vector, myvec2, which is going to have, let's say, the bigger numbers. And to see if this works, what we'll do is we'll iterate through myvector2 and print out what's there. After we run modify second, passing it myvector and myvector2. Let's see what happens. Oh, made a mistake. Myvec over here should be, it's not myvec.begin, it's vec1.begin, because it's the first vector. And it looks like that worked. So let's actually show this working in Python Tutor, because we probably should be able to see it working properly. We can go step by step through what happened. I coded that kind of quickly, so I do want to make sure that we pause and go kind of step by step through to see everything that I've done here. So let's start at the beginning. I have two vectors. One of them has the numbers 6 through 10. One of them has the numbers 60 through 100. I don't think they show up here, kind of annoyingly, but that's okay. Oh, actually, did this work? Maybe it didn't work. Oh, you know what? I think it didn't work. Because if I don't print this out, then it looks like nothing was actually done. So that's a problem. So perhaps I made a mistake here. Vector2. Well, you know what we'll do? We'll actually run this in Python Tutor and see where our mistake has occurred. So let's comment that out. Let's use Python Tutor to help us. It's possible doing this backwards is not allowed. Could be the case. Okay, so got my. What happened here? Apparently, my iterator simply wouldn't begin. So that's not so good. Why was it not allowed? Well, I suppose I can try declaring this elsewhere and see if that makes a difference. I don't think it will. It is quite possible, though, that this is that this is not permitted. I haven't actually really tried iterating backwards before, so it could be the case that it's just not actually something you're allowed to do, and I think that might quite just be the case. Okay, so important lesson I guess we've learned is that iterators only go forward. So since the iterator only goes forward, I'm going to need to iterate from the beginning of my vector to the end of it. And I'm notably going to need to make sure that when I'm inserting into vector 2, I'm going to keep track of where I'm inserting to make sure that I'm putting everything in the right order. Because here's what happens if you don't really think about it and you just try inserting. We'll start at the beginning. We'll do until the end. Once we're at the end, we're done. We'll iterate forward, and we'll try to insert to the beginning, iterator 1, and we'll see what happens. So this is not going to work, but we will at least see it doing something. Okay. Whew, skull emoji, that's always fun. Okay. So, here is my function. Okay, so now it's running out correctly. And here is my iterator that iterates through vector 1, and it's supposed to insert each of these into vector 2. Kind of annoyingly, I don't get to see vector 2, so to make sure I can actually see it, because I want to know what I'm doing, I'm actually just going to make a kind of dummy vector here that's going to have vec2.begin, just so that I can see what's going on in the other one. This isn't going to do anything, but I just want to have my visualization up so I can see what the heck is going on. Okay, so now I have my iter 2, which is the 60 to 100, and my iter 1 points from 6 to 10. And when I insert, I think when I insert, what probably happens, if I had to guess, based on this little emoji here, is that the computer has to create a brand new vector. Whenever you insert, a lot of wild things can happen, so looks like it's the case that my iterator no longer is valid, and that's something to be very careful about. So I am inserting, and I know that because when I get down here, I can see what the thing looks like. And unfortunately, it's not quite right. I have inserted everything I wanted to, all the way from 6 to 10, but they're all in the wrong order. So I need to figure out how to fix this. And the way to fix this is that instead of inserting at the beginning every time, I actually need to insert at the beginning plus move one step forward for each thing I've already inserted. So I actually can do that in just one quick line of code, which is vector2 dot begin plus, I guess I need a counter for this, huh? So counter equals 0. We will add the counter and counter plus plus. And that way it should do everything correctly. Also to see that I'm actually, again, to see what the heck is going on here, I'm actually going to reinitialize my second iterator just to show me how it's changing as we're running through everything. And this should actually give me an updated version of the vector every time. Okay, so it's kind of annoying that all of this space is wasted on like this useless text here. I want to be able to squish things. Maybe I'll just zoom out a little bit. Okay, so the 6 is inserted correctly. Now, when I want to insert the 7, I need to actually insert not at the beginning, but at position 1. So I want to do the beginning plus 1, which is my counter. So when I insert then, the 7 goes in the right place. And then the 8 goes in the right place, the 9 goes in the right place, the 10 goes in the right place. And you'll see that this flickered every time that I tried to insert something new. And the reason for that is because insertion, turns out, is actually a very time-consuming and expensive process to run, because I'm effectively rebuilding the vector every single time I insert. Not ideal, but for the purposes of solving this problem, it gets it done. So I figured it out after a little bit of trial and error. So a few things to keep in mind for the solution that I put together. This second iterator doesn't actually do anything, but because I wanted to see what was happening, it was helpful for me, for Python Tutor, to have this iterator so that I get a visualization of what the vector looks like at any given time. Now, the code that I use to solve this problem, let's just quickly go through it. I need to set up an iterator at first, which is going to start at the beginning of my first vector, which I'm going to push into the second one. Not push, I guess, insert in the second one. It's going to go to the end of it, and it's going to go one step at a time. Turns out iterators can't go backwards, as we found out together, so that approach doesn't really work. I'm going to use a counter, and it's going to tell me where I need to insert the next value, because I need to insert the very first number, the 6, at position 0, then I need to insert the 7 at position 1, the 8 at position 2, and so on. So I'm incrementing that counter every time. When I insert at the beginning plus the number of spaces equal to the counter, and the thing I'm inserting is what's at the iterator that's going through each of the elements of my very first vector. And then this code here is just so I can see what's going on. I made 2 vectors, one with 6 to 10, one with 60 to 100, and then I iterate through the second vector from the beginning till the end, and see what's in it. And it looks like what's in it is what I was looking for. So, hooray. A little longer than I anticipated for that exercise, but at least now we learned something along the way, which is always valuable. So, next exercise, here we come. Okay. Write a for loop that uses an iterator to go through a vector, starting at the beginning, and erase the element pointed to by the iterator in each loop. Does this delete all of the elements? Well, let's find out. So, we're going to write I guess we'll do it in Python Tutor. We don't really need the code over here. This is at least showing us stuff happening, which is always helpful. So, void erase vector, given, we'll stick with an integer vector, my vec. I'm going to iterate through, so we already have code that helps us to iterate through something, which is this code here. Initialize an iterator, starts at the beginning, goes to the end, increments by 1. And we're just going to do myvec.erase, iter1. That should do it. Is that the right format for erase? I think so, right? Yeah. All right. Not too complicated. Now, let's also print it out. So instead of modify second, we'll do erase vector, and we'll erase my vec, and we'll print out that vector. See what happens. So the secret is, of course, this is not going to work, but let's find out why. Okay, so here's my vector, 6 to 10. I'm going to erase the first one. So note what's happened here. When I erase the first one, the vector has a capacity, meaning it can fit 5 elements in it. The end of my vector is this 10. What's this 10 doing over here? Well, when I erased something, it still needs to fill in that extra spot in the capacity with a number, and it just defaults to filling it in with 10, because it can. The size of my vector, and I can probably print it out, will be 4, because there's only 4 things that are actually in here that I intend to have. And as I erase things, you'll see that it doesn't quite do what you think. So I erase the... I then go to the next element. Note that the 7 got skipped, because when I erased the 6, the 7 got pushed into the place of where the 6 was, so now suddenly the 7's not going to get deleted. I'm going to delete the 8. Now you can see the empty spaces here are these 2 10s, which again are not technically part of my vector. And go to the next step, which is my actual 10. I'm going to erase it. Looks like nothing has happened, but it turns out my vector now just contains 7 and 9. And then I leave it. Oh, actually, no. Is it still going? No, it actually just crashes. And that's probably because it actually went past the end of the vector, meaning it led to an error. Now, I think if I do this with an even number of numbers, it might actually have no error, but still do something quite wrong. Let's find out. I think what will end up happening here is it will not have an error, but it will do something very unexpected. So, just adding an 11 to the end, we'll delete the 6, we'll delete the 8. You notice that the 11s are getting chunked in here. We'll delete the 10. and then the code ends. And actually, it seems to have, like, it seems to think that it worked, but obviously it didn't. What happens when I print it out? Well, it's going to print out the 7. It's going to print out the 9. So I'm going to print out 11. And then that's it. What the heck happened? Why did it print out 7, 9, 11? Well, here is what really happened. These 3 11s here are secretly not part of my vector. My vector only actually contains 7, 9, and 11. And the way that I know this is I can actually print out at the end here the size and capacity, and we'll see something interesting with that. We'll do myvec.size, and then do myvec.capacity. And we'll skip to the end just to see what these numbers are, but just to skip all the way. The size of my vector is 3, and my capacity is 6. So if you look at the thing here, there are actually only 3 elements in my array, 7, 9, and 11. These other ones are just sort of placeholder elements. They don't actually have any meaning, and notably, they're not really considered elements of my vector. When I iterate through from the start to the end here is this 11. It's a real 11. This is actually inside my vector. The 11s here are not. And that means that the size is 3, but the capacity, meaning how much memory is my computer actually using right now, is 6, because it has all these empty things here. So, it's important to note the distinction between size and capacity. This is the reason that if you were going to iterate through your vector without using an iterator, you should use size and not capacity. Capacity can lead to very weird things happening, as we saw here. So clearly, not a good function that I wrote here. It does some very strange things, and there are obviously much better ways to delete everything from your vector, such as clear, which we saw in the last lecture. So don't do this, it's bad. But now we know why, which is a good lesson. So on to the last exercise. Okay. So write a function that prompts the user to continuously enter pairs of names, strings, and grades, integers, until they enter stop as a name. Store these names and grades in 2 vectors, and then output each pair. Okay, so we're going to need to prompt strings and grades, or names and grades. So we're not going to need to run this code again. We're not going to need really any of this code. So we'll have a name, and we'll have a grade. We'll start out with name being empty string and grade being 0. While name, actually we should do this, what's the best way to do this? We do want to potentially do nothing. Sure, let's get the input. So enter a name. This is not going to be the cleanest way to do it, but I just want to get it kind of working. So enter a name. They enter their name. I guess we'll force them to use a single word. And then while the name is not equal to stop, we're going to ask them to enter a grade. That goes into their integer, into the grade. So now I have a name and a grade. I'm going to need some vectors to put these into. So we'll have a vector string names, and we'll have a vector int grades. So we'll do names dot pushback our name, grades dot pushback the int. Sorry, the grade. And then we'll ask them for this again. Okay, so we do this, and eventually we got a bunch of, and I think I'll have to do this in my other compiler because I need to be able to do user input. So back to over here. Just gonna yoink. All right, so first let's make sure this does what I think it does. It doesn't have any errors or anything. enter a name, like 40, me, 10, stop. Okay. So I have my two vectors. They have a bunch of stuff now. I have stored them. Now output each pair. So since I know my two vectors are the same size, because I filled them up the same way, it's actually very easy for me to do what I need to do, which is for... and I think this is a case where iterator is probably not the best way to do it. And the reason for that is that I would need to have an iterator for each. I suppose we can do it that way. Sure, why not? We've been using iterators this whole time. Iterate through names from beginning to end. And we'll also have, we need to initialize iterator 1 and iterator 2. And iterator 2 is going to iterate through our grades. So it's going to start at the beginning of the grades. Iterator 1 will start through the names, and all we're going to do is we're going to print out each of them. So we're going to print out name, which is going to have what's at iterator 1, grade, it's what's at iterator 2. And then we need to increment iterator 2 because it's not part of our for loop. And let's see this work. Oh, I made a mistake. How much for equals? Oh, yes, these should be, so iterator 1 is a string iterator. Iterator 2 is an integer one. So here's iterator 1 and iterator 2. There we go. Iterator 1 should be strings, iterator 2 should be integer. Got to make sure you match your types. There's Mike. Got 100. Michelle has 1,000. Mary has 60. And let's stop. And there's me with 100, Michelle with 1,000, Mary with 60. Boom, all done. So here's just a case where I needed two iterators for two different vectors, but since my for loop can only have one of them running at a time, I'm going to need to manually run the other one, which means I need to set it before my loop starts, and I need to increment it myself inside of my loop. And that way both iterators are pointing through everything at the same time. So I think that's everything for today. Feel free to message on Slack if you have any more questions, and let me know how you like the videos for this course. We're at the end here now, so I haven't gotten really much of any feedback about the videos, so if these are something you think would make sense for future iterations of this course or for when I run 1061 in the next semester, let me know, because so far I've got no feedback. I have no idea what's going on, so feel free to reach out and give me a holler. Otherwise, good luck on the final test, and I will see you there. Bye-bye.